thank you again for coming out to our Revolutionary War History Weekend. This is our first ever Revolutionary War History Weekend. We're excited to be able to do this here at the Central West Virginia Genealogy and History Library. As a reminder, for those of you who've already heard this speech about 100 times, especially today, we are a volunteer and nonprofit organization, and we depend heavily on donations, membership, and grant money. So with lots of grants and things like that, and availability of that money, we do depend especially on those memberships. If you'd like to become a member and learn all about the incredible cool things that we're doing here at the library, helping you find your roots and connect to your ancestors, then please see Patty, our director, or one of our incredible volunteers that we have here. If you're a volunteer, would you mind raising your hand?
It's a village.
It is a village. So we have a very cool lineup today. We've got the General Hugh Mercer chapter, West Virginia chapter of the SAR here. They're outside. Definitely come out and see them. As soon as our next speaking event is over, they're going to be doing some demonstrations, and will be talking to us a little bit more. We also, in speaking of our next event is the Scouts of the Revolution with David Vasquez, and then we also have an incredibly exciting Central West Virginia Revolutionary War heroes reading of names coming up as well. And then we'll be closing with our coloring contest winners. So if anybody's watching, we are looking for some final entries of those coloring contest winners. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jean Thorne. If you came out for our Pringle Tree event and our Captain Samuel Pringle event, you'll know that Jean is amazing, and we are so excited to have him back. One of the most legendary stories from the Revolutionary War frontier comes from Jean reenacting Major John McColloch's brother of the famed McCullough's Leap. So Major Samuel McColloch, and Jean, you're going to be talking about that and talking about the feat of your brother, correct? Yes. All right, exciting. Everybody welcome Jean Thorne.
Thank you. It's really good to be here today, and history is a passion for me, especially the French and Indian War, Revolutionary War time period. I really enjoy Civil War also, but I don't reenact that period. I became a reenactor about 35 years ago, and started out like most people do in rendezvous settings, and kind of narrowed my persona down to a Western Virginia frontier scout. So at some point along the line, I've got a really good friend, Doug Wood. We went to school together at WVU. We were in wildlife together, and he does Chingway, Delaware Indian, and he does other personas. He's really well known here in West Virginia and the surrounding states, and he encouraged me to work up a persona for someone that was near and dear to my heart, and so I did. And the first one that I did was Samuel Pringle. I'm not directly related to Samuel Pringle, but I am his brother-in-law. John Cutright is my fifth great grandfather, who was his brother-in-law and a well-known scout on the early, it was Western Virginia at that time, frontier, out of Bush's Ford and what is now Buckhannon. And I have also done Jesse Hughes, who is near to this area. He started out at Bush's Fort and moved to West Fort, and Jane Lou is where his cabin was, and back behind where the nursing home is up there. It's where Jesse's cabin was there. So I've done him. But somewhere along the line, I said, my other line, that relative is on my mother's side. Also, Coonsport, up where Shinston is today. Those are all relatives on my mom's side. Like my whole lines go back to this area during the Revolutionary War. But my grandmother was a McColloch, and I started digging into it, and John McColloch, who I'm going to go into first person today as, is my 6th great grandfather. And he was very prolific. He had 16 kids, and a lot of McCulloughs in West Virginia go back to John. The McCulloughs settled from Fort Pitt, Pittsburgh, all the way down through like Wheeling, and pretty much any McColloch you run into, no matter how it's spelled, it can be spelled like I spelled this one today, or it could be a O-U-G-H. They were McColloch with the C-H when they were in Scotland. When they moved to Northern Ireland, and I always say my family got kicked out of Scotland, and then they got kicked out of Ireland, and that's why they're here, but they added the O-U-G-H to the end when they were in Ireland. So my family spells it the O-U-G-H, but I've seen accounts back even Samuel and John spelled 3 different ways, and one of them was O-U-G-H, so who knows exactly how they spelled their name back then. But they're the same name. Same for my actual name is Thorne. My uncle had an E on the end. My dad did not have an E on the end. My uncle found out when he was in the Air Force that when the courthouse did his birth certificate, they put an E on the end. I just switch. Is it on top?
It's just a little harder to hear than the back.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I got a loud voice. Usually nobody has a hard time hearing me. But yeah, it's interesting names like that. So when you see names that are very closely aligned, like there's just a little bit of discrepancy, you can trace them back, and they're normally the same common ancestor. But John was born in New Jersey. His dad was also named John. John was a colonel in the Continental Army. And when John moved his family to what is now West Virginia, which is, first he started out in Hardy County on the Potomac River, and they were there for a few years, and then he moved them to the far western reaches of the frontier, and I mean right in the face of the Indians that lived in Ohio, which was Ohio County today, which is where Wheeling is. And they moved there in 1770. And that was a very dangerous time to live there. John and Sam's dad, John, was actually pretty wealthy. He had land, he had a estate. He was the sheriff of Ohio County, but he fought in the Revolutionary War too. Like I said, he was actually a Continental soldier, but he died in 1778. So this story today is about, I'm going to talk about the very front end of the Revolutionary War before it actually happened, maybe the first battle even, and we're going to go through to the end. So I'm going to go into first person, so we're going to snap our fingers, and we're right now in 1785. Hello, folks. I'm glad to see that you're moving into our settlement here. My family has been here for several years now, and we just love this area. We just love the woods, the streams. We love everything about this. Rich land. You throw you up a cabin, put you out a cornfield, find you a good water source. This is living. This is living. Now, I know you don't know a lot about this area yet, but since we're past the War for Independence now, you would think this is safe, but it's not. I'm going to warn you right now. Always keep your gun with you, keep your knife, keep your tomahawk handy. Women, bar the cabin doors, especially when the men are gone, because the Indians still are a threat. And they're going to be for a while. So I'm warning you, it is not safe here on the frontier. I'm going to go back, and we moved here in 1770, and there was no forts. There was no forts, except Fort Pitt, which started out as Fort Duquesne, and when the British fought the French, they took that fort and they changed the name of it to Fort Pitt. So that's our main fort out here. All the other forts between there and Fort Randolph, which is on the confluence of the Kanawha River in the Ohio, all these forts, there's somewhere around a dozen of them, all were built because of the war, because of the danger. A fort is a place that everybody can come to and get inside and be safe. And we still have these forts. If you need them, fort up. Bring as much as you can inside. You have to get water, you have to get food, and have to have enough powder and lead to keep you for a while. But you can fort up in there. And that's what we did, and I'm going to tell you about that. So there was a lot of skirmishes with Indians all the way when we first came here. You've never been safe here. So we had our times, but the Indians gathered up, and in 1774, Lord Dunmore, the governor of Virginia, rounded up his soldiers and gathered them up. General Andrew Lewis from the Greenbrier Valley, he raised an army too, and they started marching west. Andrew Lewis went to the confluence of the Kanawha and the Ohio. There was no fort there at that time. And Lord Dunmore came north to where we're at today, here around Fort Henry. And they planned to pincer the Indians in and fight the Indians. We were primarily Shawnees under Chief Cornstalk. Chief Cornstalk was a fierce battler. So Andrew Lewis and his men got to what's Point Pleasant now today, and they bedded down. They went to bed. A couple of scouts got up early in the morning, and William White was one of them, from Bush's Fort over near the Buchanan River. And they did a little scout, and they saw the presence of Indians nearby. I mean, right on them. And it's still dark, and the Indians were gathered there. They don't like to do battle in the dark. They think their soul will not go to the happy hunting ground if they're killed at night. Same thing if they lose their hair. They're superstitious. They were waiting for the crack of daylight to fall upon us without us knowing what was going on. So Captain White and the other scout roused the men, informed Andrew Lewis, and they were ready. They formed lines. They were ready for the Indians, and the battle was on, and it was all day. And over the din of battle, you could hear Chief Cornstalk rallying his braves. You could hear his voice over all the shots and the screaming and the hollering. He had a very penetrating voice. So the battle went on, and it was nip and tuck. It was back and forth. And men fell on both sides. Many men. As it grew dark, the Indians retreated. Indians don't like to lose braves. They don't. And the cost was becoming too great for what they were seeing to be the end here. So they retreated. So it was a win for our men there. Cornstalk and his men retreated across into Ohio to their villages over there. Lord Dunmore decided to pursue them down through there and caught up with them, and they had a big peace treaty. And he didn't include Andrew Lewis and his men on the negotiations at all, but Lord Dunmore made the arrangements. So peace came. Well, that stirred things up. The governor, all the commanders of the militias, everybody could see that this was a real threat in the future. So they started to build forts. Built one at Fort Henry. It was actually named after Governor Fincastle, but it changed to Fort Henry when the Revolution started. All kinds of other ones. And I want to say that there was no distinction of state lines at all. Our militias, our men, our frontier scouts, like these men here, if the call came, they went, wherever it was. There was no distinction between the Pennsylvania line and the Virginia line, and south, the North Carolina line. There was no distinction. Kentucky line. There was no distinction. This was all the frontier, and we were all in it together. So, as they built forts, the one at Washington was Catfish Camp. Two closest here were Van Meter's Fort and Holiday's Cove's Fort. They were the two close ones. But there was about a dozen forts up and down the river, and Fort Randolph was the most southern one. Matthew Arbuckle was the commander of Fort Randolph. David Shepard, Captain David Shepard, was the commander at Fort Henry. Different commanders that were appointed by my father. My father, being a colonel in the Continental Army, was in charge of this area, and he is the one that appointed the commanders to the forts. Well, he appointed my brother, Samuel Pringle, to be the commander at Van Meter's Fort. Van Meter's was the biggest of the forts in this area. So, things went on. Then we come to the year 1777, known as the Bloody Sevens. That was an eventful year. That was a year when you could lose your hair in a heartbeat. You better be on it. Better be on it, boys. I'm telling you. The Bloody Sevens was dangerous. Right from the start. Well, a party went out from the fort to gather horses up. They were out in a cornfield outside just a little ways. And all of a sudden, they ran into some Indian scouts. And there was a skirmish. And bodies fell to the ground on both sides. And the casualties weren't too bad for our men, but they got back in the fort. And Captain David Shepard, who was the commander at Fort Henry, decided this is a bad situation. And he called for companies of men to come. So two of the smaller forts sent men. There was 14 men under Captain Ogle, and there was about 20 men under another captain. And so he said, let's send one party out here and we'll just scout. So that's what they did. Not good. They fell right into an ambush, Every single man was killed except the captain. He made it back to the fort, and he had been shot several times. He was very badly wounded. Lost an entire company right there, right at the beginning. So Captain Shepard sent the other company out to try to retrieve those men, help them. They didn't know if they were dead at this point, be relief for them. They were ambushed too and wiped out. 2 companies of men, like 35 men, gone. Now at that point, we were in bad shape. And so he sent runners out all the way up to Catfish Camp and every fort in between to come as quick as you can. So they came from Holiday's Fort, Van Swearington. Holiday's was a smaller fort, but they had 14 men that they could send. You couldn't leave the fort empty. You had to just kind of divide your men up and say, you guys go relieve Fort Henry and we'll defend the fort here. Well, the same thing at Van Meter's fort. Major McColloch, he ended up with 40 men. That was a pretty good number. And they lit out for Fort Henry on horses. So they get near the fort, and the Indians just descend on them. I mean, they came out of everywhere. There was about 350 Indian braves under Chief Dunquot. They were Wyandot and Mingo primarily, with a few Shawnees, a few Delawares, a few from other smaller tribes, but primarily Wyandots. And they were fierce warriors. And here they come, and they just swarmed the area. They were everywhere. And they tried to cut off these 40 men and Major McColloch. And Major McColloch played rear guard, and he kept them off of the 40 until they got inside. So Van Swearington's troops of 14 and McCullough's troops of 40 ended up inside the fort. But the bad part is my brother got cut off. The Indians had him cornered. And they came from 3 different directions. The first direction turned him, and he went towards Wheeling Hill. And it was like a rectangle. And the only side that didn't have Indians coming at him was the very summit of Wheeling Hill. They came at him from 3 sides. He couldn't get out of the box. And he tried. Every direction he went. And they didn't shoot at him. They weren't wanting to capture him. They hated my brother. My brother was an unerring shot with one of these, and he had made many lodges mourn. He had killed many Indians. And they wanted him. They wanted to torture him. Indians are really good at slow, cruel deaths. Really good at it. And they had plans for my brother. And so they closed in on him, and they closed in on him, and it just kept getting tighter and tighter, and he made his way to the top. And at the summit, he looked over the side, and it's 300 foot to Wheeling Creek at the bottom. And it's a sheer cliff bluff for about 50 feet or more. And then it's just almost straight down, but it's like shale and rocks and everything. And he said, okay, if I let them have me, that ain't going to happen. Because I know what they're going to do to me. Or I can just jump over here. There's a slim chance I might survive. But if I die, that's better than them getting their hands on me. And that was his decision. And he spurred his horse. He had a great horse. He spurred his horse. And it was a free fall. Like I said, the rock cliff was 50 feet. Free fall. And the horse hit with all 4 feet and slid in the shale and just stumbled and slipped and all the way to the bottom. The horse still on its feet, my brother still on its back, and he started riding across the creek and up the other side. And all the Indians, and Simon Girty and his brothers were there too. All the Indians were at the top. And at first they didn't say anything. They didn't whoop. They didn't do anything. They didn't shoot. And then a loud cheer came out from the Indians and the Girtys because of the bravery of my brother. They actually cheered him. And they did not work their way around and try to pursue him. It's amazing, but they did. So my brother got a reputation there. And they call it McColloch's Leap. And so I didn't lose my brother that day. So we went on, and lots of events happened following that. That was the first siege of Fort Henry. Lots of forays out. My brother and I went on General Broadhead's mission. We did lots of different things. And in 1782, early in the year, February the 1st actually, he married Mary Mitchell. Mary was John Mitchell's son. Her brother was Silas Mitchell, a famous scout on the frontier. And they just fell in love and got married. Things were going great. Then came that summer. They'd only been married about 6 months. And my brother Samuel and I went out on a scout. Now, he had a premonition before we went on this scout, and he gave my wife, who was also named Mary McColloch, he gave my wife Mary his watch. He said, I want you to have this if I don't come back. Well, we got caught in an ambush, and my brother got shot first thing. And they killed him. And he was laying on the ground, and an Indian jumped out and started to scalp him. And I was still on my horse, and I whirled, and I shot that Indian right through the heart and killed him. And he fell right over my brother. And then I couldn't do anything because they were swarming. So I left and went all the way back to Fort Van Meter. The next day, we gathered a company together, came back, found my brother laying there, disemboweled and his heart removed. Those Indians had ate his heart. They divided it up and ate his heart. A really courageous man that they really respected. That's what they would do. They would carve his heart out and cut it up and eat it. And that's what they did. And I was so sad. I was so sad. And him and Mary did not have children. She went on to marry Captain Wood. It was very sad. And, I went on to rescue some forts in Kentucky. I fought at the Battle of Kings Mountain in Georgia, in North Carolina, the Overlanders. We killed General Ferguson that day. Yeah, it was very eventful, but time after time. One thing I really regret is I was part of the foray against the Moravian Delaware Indians, and I think that's why they killed my brother that day. I heard that the Indians said that John killed a great chief of ours, so we killed a great chief of theirs. But Yeah, this frontier has been very dangerous. But the war is over. So I want you all, keep your guns handy, keep your tomahawks and knives handy. Keep your loved ones close. But enjoy it. Because this is paradise. This is paradise here. My brother and I, as militia, we're also scouts, and we've been over this entire region, all the way from Fort Pitt down to Fort Randolph and over into, like I said, Kentucky, and back down the other forts like Crickets and Bushes. We've been over this whole area, and you can't find a better place on God's green earth than right here in Western Virginia. So raise your families. Someday they'll look back on this time, and they'll thank you for coming here and settling here. Let's come out of 1785, and we'll just talk a little bit, and then I'll open it up for questions. Like I said, John ended up having 16 children, and they were famous frontiersmen in their time. Matter of fact, the historians say they were a little bit too famous. Everybody knew them and their stories so well that a lot of it didn't get written down. And what I talked about, there was lots of other details that they know they were there, they know they were involved. Samuel was a leader of militia at all these different battles, and John was too. But a lot of it didn't get written down. But accounts later, Lyman Draper, a historian that gathered stories from back then, found out that yes, they were very prominent figures on that early frontier. And the Indians recalled, one Indian was almost 100 years old and recalled Sam and John McColloch. And he's the one that told the story about John killing this Delaware chief at the Moravian Massacre, and that's why he said he was at the actual killing of Samuel McColloch, and that's the reason they set up that ambush and wanted to kill John. They didn't get John, but they got Sam, and because he was so brave, that's why they ate his heart. So these different things, I mean, you can go back and just that time period, the history was just awesome. You know, we talked about Chief Cornstalk. Chief Cornstalk was the one voice for peace from the Indian side. And he tried to turn it during that time, but before the first siege of Fort Henry. He tried to make peace. So he went to the fort at Fort Randolph, and he actually went inside the fort with his son and another brave. And he was trying to give them information and try to negotiate a peace treaty. But way back during the Pontiac's War, Chief Cornstalk had raided the area right over Yorktown, Virginia, that area, the James River, and those settlements over there never forgot Chief Cornstalk for what happened during that time. So they had sent militia to the western border to help out. And when they found out that Chief Cornstalk was inside Fort Randolph, they just stormed in there and overwhelmed. They said they would kill Matthew Arbuckle if he got in the way. And so the local militia couldn't do anything. They swarmed in the cabin, and Chief Cornstalk stood up, looked them right in the eyes, and they shot him 6 times and killed him. Right there. They shot his son, they shot the other brave. That was the end of the peace. Blackfish was the Shawnee chief that took his place. And there were lots of chiefs on the Indian side, White Eyes, Nahalema, Buckonzehelas, all these different chiefs, all of them had a bent for war, but not Cornstalk, but he was out of the way. So, you know, there was never any peace really until right up against 1800. Like, if we were going back to 1885, there was still 15 more years of not being able to have peace there. And so it was a dangerous, dangerous time. But really interesting history. Any questions?